Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Y-ZUP. Um, as you can see, I'm on my Todd today. I'm by myself. So apologies from my sister, but I'm going it solo today. I am Maureen. Okay, and my sister and I, we spoke about various topics before. We spoke about womanhood, motherhood, and we were on the topic of masculinity, and fatherhood was encompassed in that as well. And I thought what I'd do today, because I'm on my own, I thought I'd just go over some of the stuff we spoke about, but introduce a few life experiences as well. And what I'll talk about first of all is womanhood, and growing up for me. I remember at a young age when I was probably about 10, and I had big feet. And the difficulty with having a big feet at such a young age was that you didn't get to buy the stylish shoes or the kids' shoes. You had to go to the grown-up sections, and some of those shoes were horrible, and I think that kind of had a negative effect on me that made me feel that I was different. And I think growing up as well, that kind of feeling also continued. Um, and also the big feet didn't go away. I remember having to wear, well, not having to wear, but I chose to wear trousers because with trousers, it covered up the size of your feet. And if you wore a skirt, obviously your feet, in my eyes, would look like boats. So as a result of that, I kind of got a name for myself, or people saw me in a certain light. I wasn't very feminine, and people started to question, who is this woman? You know, and I didn't have very much confidence either. you know. And it's interesting sometimes when I look at young people or young women in this time and the pressures that they are under. And if I was born in this time, I can imagine the influences that would take me down a certain road. A woman with big feet, a girl with big feet, no confidence, doesn't look very feminine. And also, yes, I forgot I had big hands as well, larger hands than the average. So, all those things would have colored me in a certain light, and as I said, they made me feel quite inferior and quite down. I lacked self-esteem. So I suppose what I'm just trying to say out there is growing up isn't always an easy thing. And if you're in the wrong environment, surrounded by the wrong people, it can be even more difficult, and I think that was what life was like for me. I remember going to the West Indies as well, and I remember I used to walk like a ballerina. My feet were like out, curving outwards, and I was teased something chronic, and that didn't help as well. But I had a sister when I came back to England, and she basically sort of trained me how to walk properly. So that really was vital for me because then I suppose my esteem started to build a bit as well. So you do always need a sort of a kind person in the background supporting you all the way through those learning curves. I think with femininity as well, it's the funny thing, who defines femininity really? Do we leave it to the books or the scientists or the biologists, or how do we define it? Who defines it? Do I define it for myself, or would it be just the ordinary person out there or the media? Because it's I think it can be a dangerous thing, because I remember thinking that being feminine, you had to walk a certain way, probably have to move your hands like this, you have to walk and wriggle, you know what I mean? And your feet definitely shouldn't be big, and you shouldn't have hands like mine, and it shouldn't be veiny either. So I would definitely not be classed as feminine in my time. I don't know about now. And I used to wear trousers a lot as well, and trainers. I never wore shoes really much because, as I said, big feet. You couldn't get the shoes that you wanted either. So it was a difficult time. And if I don't know if anybody out there has experienced things like that, you know, let us know, share your thoughts and your feelings and your experience, because by sharing, this is how we all learn and we grow together. It's a horrible thing to think that you're on your own. No one understands what I'm going through or what I've been through. So it's always worthwhile having those discussions and sharing that. Because, what did they say? A pain shared, it halves, it's halved. Problem shared is halved. So it's always good to do that. But obviously choose the people you talk to as well. You got to know who you're talking to. So that's my experiences of being defined by other people as not being feminine, and being mindful that you've got to be careful of those things, because at the end of the day, you've got to remember that we are created beautiful people. We are beautiful people, and we all act differently, look differently. I can't act like anybody else. I am my unique self. You are your new unique self, and you should have the confidence in your own skin. Don't let anybody define you, really. Don't let anyone define you. So that's just about me for the time being, about some of the things I've experienced as when I was young, about being a feminine or not feminine. Now, how do I see myself? I don't class myself as, I just class myself as me, to be honest. Um, I dress how I feel I need to dress. If I want to wear, as today you can see I'm wearing scraggy jeans with rips all over the place, and somebody could say, well, you're not basically acting your age. That could be one thing that someone could say about me. I've still got my big feet, but I don't care. I'm wearing sandals today, which I know when I was younger that would definitely not have been the done thing, because I would have been too embarrassed to do that, fearful of what people would say. But now I'm a woman of a certain age, I guess, and it doesn't faze me. I suppose as a young person, you want to be seen to belong. You want to be in the in crowd, so all those pressures are there to conform. And I think as older people, we shouldn't really forget that the pressures for young people, what that's about, because we've passed it now. I know I've got younger children, and sometimes I'm trying to sort of give them the wealth of my experience from the things I've been through. And I just see their eyes glaze over, because they think I'm coming from cloud cuckoo land. It doesn't resonate. And when they tell me that it doesn't resonate, oh boy, does that hurt? Because it's almost like all the building blocks of my life mean nothing to them. It's almost like you leave a legacy, or your house. If I die, my house will go to my boys. But if I die, my experience, my legacy of life would go to them, wouldn't it? But then would they discard it as nothing? It means nothing. Mom, you're from the old ages. You're a dinosaur. And that's quite scary, because I would have thought there were values that I could instill, you know. But what's your thoughts out there? I'd love to know what young people feel. Do you feel that, talking to the elders, they have nothing to give you, nothing worth listening to, nothing to take on board? They're out of it. They have no understanding of your issues, and your issues and their issues are totally at odds. That would be interesting to find out how you feel. And even older people, how do you get on with speaking to young people about your life and your experience? Do they listen? And that's an interesting thought. So please tune in and let us know what your thoughts are and what your experiences are as well. Also, we're talking about fatherhood as well. I know we just had Father's Day, and celebrating the fathers in this world. And it's interesting because everybody's been wishing everybody, all the men folk, happy Father's Day. But this was something that someone sent in, and I thought I'd read this because it was interesting and shows us sometimes we take things for granted, that everybody's garden is rosy, and as you can appreciate, that's not always the case. So this is what this young lady sent in. She says, Father's Day is complicated. I've always been a daddy's girl. I'm just like him. Same fire, same drive, same sharp mind. But somehow being his mirror didn't bring me closer. When I chose to have my son, I lost my connection to my father. That choice cost me something I never expected. And then I lost my son, and his father walked away too. Two men I loved, two fathers, both gone in different ways. Each time I was left standing in the silence, I used to chase answers, affection, understanding, but I've stopped the search now. Not because it doesn't matter, but because I do. And I thought that was interesting. So she's no longer chasing for those answers, because now she knows that she's the one who matters. Then she said, because love should never have to be earned. So Father's Day doesn't feel joyful. It feels like a weight, like an absence dressed in celebration. This isn't a cry for pity. It's just the truth, my truth. And if you're feeling it too, I see you. How are you moving through today? And I thought that was quite profound. And I celebrate this woman because she was transparent and vulnerable, and it does show you that sometimes when we're celebrating doesn't mean that everybody else's story is the same. Some people's fathers just haven't existed. They haven't been there for them. They've let them down. They don't have a father figure. They've been abused by a father. All these, there's so many things that one word can mean to different people. It could be a great experience and it could be a painful one. So I suppose my message for you is just to be kind to each other, really. We got to be kind to each other because we don't know where people are coming from in their lives. Do you know what I mean? And being sensitive as well. That's so important, isn't it? So, so important. My father, talking about my father, he was a funny character, really. I could talk to my father about anything, and he had a wacky sense of humor. But I think, but sometimes he could be, what's the word? He was proud of his kids, but sometimes he didn't always give of himself enough, because he'd love his dominoes, he'd love his going to the domino dues. I remember one time we were playing in a gig, my brother and I. He said, "Dad, come along." It was just down the road. And even though he was proud of us and he celebrated our successes, he didn't turn up. So, and we never forgot that. Love him as we did. You just didn't forget, really. And we never really understood why. But, you live and you learn and you forgive and you move on, because I suppose you just got to try and understand where that generation is coming from. They feel they put food on the table, they pay for the bills, they do all those things. And sometimes they would have probably felt, well, that's enough. You're loved. You're loved. Um, but nowadays, I suppose our attitude to that is different. But I think my father was Jamaican, and I suppose when he came to this country, he came on his own. I think he was probably about the age late 20s, and he came on his own to set up life. And you think that was a massive task, a massive venture to do, really. And he was married to my mum at the time, and he left her in Jamaica to start here in this country. And what he wanted to do was he'd work in a factory, worked in a factory, and he would work and save, and in time he would send for my mum, and that's what he did. And I remember, well, I don't remember, but stories my dad has told me was that it wasn't easy um, living in this country, as you can appreciate, because of there was racism here as well, and people didn't want to give them a place to live, and it was the Asian community who really opened their doors and gave them rooms to live in. And my dad used to say that when they used to work, in the factory, they did shift work. So you'd have two families in a house, probably sharing a room. And when one person would be at work, the other man would be sleeping. And when it was time for the other man to come back, that other man would be out working. And so they'd have a shift who shared the bed. And I think, my goodness, what a life. But they did it because they knew it was just for a short time till their feet was on the floor and they were more stable. But yes, my dad, he worked very hard in a factory, and in time he sent for my mom. And my mom had to start working, and she was an auxiliary nurse. And I think it was an interesting life, I suppose, because they're sending money back to the kids, and they left them with people they trusted to take care of them, and with the money being sent. And there's so many stories. There's so many Jamaican people. I don't know if there's people from other Caribbean countries who've done the same thing, but I know, like with my parents, there's a lot of people who've lived that kind of life where they've had their kids and sent money over to them, trusted them in the care of either families or very good friends, and even those kids have their stories that I don't think they've been told, you know. Um, but in time, my dad and my mom sent for my brother and my sister. And at that time, I was born. Before they came, I was born. So I thought I was the only child till those two strangers came along. But the reason why I'm just talking about this is just to share with you, right, really, some of the difficulties that the Caribbean family experienced and how that really impacted their lives, really. Because with my sister and brother being in the West Indies and waiting for to be sent over, they were called, there's a name that's called that young children in Jamaica are called when their families are sending money or clothes out to them. They're called barrel kids. And I don't know if you've ever heard of that. Barrel children. Because sometimes our parents would send barrels of clothes over to them so that they're not destitute or whatever. So they were called barrel kids. And I suppose you could say there's a stigma to that, and I dare say they went through a lot. Sometimes they didn't even get all the clothes. Things were sent to them. Sometimes it went to other people. Money was sent. Sometimes they didn't receive those things. And people have stories to tell. I know, like when my brother and sister came over, they were very young. Probably my sister was probably 5 and my brother probably 9, maybe something like that. And they came over on the plane by themselves. And when they came off at the airport, they had to meet these two strange people who they didn't even recognize. Didn't recognize them. It was their mum and dad. And can you imagine? You imagine you're away from someone, parents for a long time, and all of a sudden you're reunited to people who don't even look like who you remember them looking like, and you probably don't even look like what they remember. And the bond, where is the bond gone? Where is the bond gone? That couldn't be easy. That couldn't be easy. You know, many people have suffered. They've got stories to tell, and those stories haven't been heard, and they need to be told, because this is quite a big subject, and many young children who came over after their parents set up for them, they have a story to tell. And it's not always a good story, you know. But one day I'll write the book. But yes, so yes, that's that story about Barrow kids and my sister and brother being Barrow children, and meeting me for the first time, and me them, and the difficulties that started first of all, you know, because who were these strange people? I was here first, you know, and they come over and they're saying they're my brother and sister, you know. And I know that some families, some siblings who've experienced that, to this day they don't get on. And not just that, also sometimes there's this, what is it? There's this separation. There's the British kids, the ones born here, and there's the Caribbean kids. And sometimes you find that the parents favored the British kids more than the Caribbean kids. And that caused great friction. Some people are suffering to this day. In the job I used to do in social care, I met a family just like that who had children from, you know, who were born, ones who were born in Jamaica. They brought them over to be amongst their kids who were born here. And the conflict between those two parties, those two factions, was terrible, absolutely terrible, you know. And the parents favoured the British kids more. Imagine that. You know, that's quite painful, you know. It's funny, you know, it kind of reminds me of I don't know if you know the story in the Bible about Joseph and his multicolour coat that was given to him by his dad, who favoured him above all his other 12 brothers, you know. And as a result, they tried to, they were going to, well, they planned to kill him, didn't they? And what they did, they sold him into slavery instead. But you can see the sort of the commonality there, you know. When parents treat certain children differently, it's not a positive thing to do, and the kids are the ones who suffer, and the relationships, sometimes those relationships don't mend. But you know what, I was fortunate because I'm quite close, we're quite close. We've got four of us in our family and we're quite close, and don't ask me what the magic spell was to do that. I really don't know. I don't know, but we are close today. So, but I know other people who aren't. So, it's just interesting, and it's important to be aware of those dynamics, because they do exist, you know. And it's like I said, it's not talked about much, but people do suffer and are suffering in silence. So that's some of the life experiences that I've had. And I thought I'd just want to share that with you. And I don't know if you've been through anything similar, and especially people from the Asian community, or you know, other communities. If you've been through anything similar, share it. I know one of my Asian friends was saying that they didn't have Barrow kids, but they had freshies. They called them freshies, and those were children who came from um, Pakistan, or probably even India, and they were similar to Barrel kids, but called freshies. So that's interesting. So if you've got stories that you want to share, or things that you feel, you know, you're still struggling with, you know, let us know. Share. And we'll see what we can do. We see if we can do research or talk to more people and get more people on who can share those experiences too. So that would be useful, and how they've coped, strategies they've used to get through. Because you know what, we all need resilience in this world today. There's so much things that we're struggling with, so much difficulties, and sometimes no man is an island. We should never struggle on our own. And sometimes we think people, it's just us, but trust me, there's so many people out there whose experiences are similar, and it's worth talking about, and it's worth being known and put out in the public arena. So let's talk about, what should we talk about now? Shall we talk about, I've spoken about femininity. I've spoken about parts of fatherhood. There's so many things that's happening as well. With the father is a very important person in a child's life. And some people who don't have fathers have walked out. Sometimes those people, those children, are searching to this day, trying to find that father figure, because they've lost. It's almost gives them their identity, and some fathers don't play their roles at all, and some do, and some struggle. And there's no rule book, is there? There's no real guide to these things. And some fathers, they've never been brought up by a father figure themselves. So where do they learn from? They're learning bit by bit. And the sort of the media out there, I don't think it really helps. It's not really a great guide, because there's so many ideologies that take people off at different directions. Which one is the real? Which one is the right answer? Who tells you what's right? And I can always say that being a Christian, for me, the father figure comes from God for me. And I know a lot of people probably think, well, God is, what's that got to do with anything? But a father figure is someone who takes interest in the children, really, and teaches from his own experience, and guides and leads and supports, and even corrects. I think my father was my dad was a disciplinarian, but then so was my mom. Um, and sometimes we think that discipline isn't a good thing, and it depends on what you call discipline, doesn't it? Because I know that some parents from the Caribbean, I mean, some of their idea of discipline was really intense, and nowadays they'd call that abuse, and sometimes you wonder, where did that kind of idea come from? And I've got my feelings about that, because some of our parents and their parents weren't too far off from slavery anyway. And I think some of those techniques and punishments were probably from that time brought into the present, Um, but thank God there's been, what's the word, safety measures put in place where people can't do that anymore, and children have rights now. Um, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think sometimes with, what is it, with the government and all that taking total hands off, parents taking their total hands off, they've mm, they've created monsters in a way sometimes, that children now feel that they don't have to listen to parents. They can divorce parents. Parents have no say in anything. Parents can't come with them on meetings, or, unless that child says. And I think, wow, that's kind of scary, because not all children mature enough to make decisions, and yet they've been told they can do what they want to do, and there's no one gatekeeping that either. And I think as a result now we're seeing so many children who are, I don't know, in places they shouldn't be. You know, they're in harm's way because they were told you don't have to listen to your parents. You know, you have your own mind now. You can make decisions of your own. You can divorce your parents. You can do this, you can do that. And there's no boundaries. There's got to be boundaries in everything. There's got to be boundaries, and people have to be kept safe. You know, so I suppose some parents do feel that they're left out on a limb, you know, and and that's not always the way it should be. So what do you think? What do you think about your child rearing skills? How did you learn to bring up your children? What examples were you set? And what examples have you been set that you thought, wow, I don't want to be that way with my children? You know, I remember I had a friend of mine who said his father was very hard on him and demanded respect. And I remember him saying to me that I think he had 4 kids or 3 kids, and he said, you know what, Maureen, I'm not going to bring my kids up the same way my dad did. I'm not going to bring them up with any rules. They can do what they want to do. You know, they're not even going to come. I'm not even going to tell them to call me dad. I don't want them to call me dad. They can call me by my first name. All right. And he did exactly that. And I tell you something. I remember seeing him some years later, and he said his life with his kids was bedlam. They had no respect. They shouted at him, they swore at him, they hit him, all those kind of things, because they had no respect for him, because he gave them total freedom to do whatever they wanted, and they did exactly that. And now he wanted to pull back the reins. He had no control at all. You know, so sometimes you can find that how we've been treated in the past, we can throw the baby out with the bathwater, but you can't do that. You've got to always look at the pros and the cons. What worked? What didn't work? What do I need to do? What do I need to change? And apply that. But yes, it's all interesting, isn't it? It's very, very interesting. Child rearing isn't easy. I remember when I was single and thinking, you know, what kind of person I was going to be. I thought I'd be, when I met Mr. Right, not Mr. Perfect, because I don't believe in that. When I met Mr. Right, I thought I'd be the best wife ever, you know. And I thought when we had kids, they'd be perfect kids, perfect. Growing up, no problems. But I think when you embark on that life, boy, do you learn some stuff. You're not as easygoing as you thought you would be. You're not even as nice as you thought you'd be. You know, I've learned so many things about myself, you know, being in a relationship. And it's not easy. Sometimes you can be selfish, thoughtless, wanting things your way or being done your way, not learning to appreciate the person enough, thinking they've got to do things my way. They should understand the way I think. They should think about me, you know. They should talk to me this way. They should talk, you know, and not really taking on board what's happening for that person, you know. And it's just interesting, isn't it? You know, we've got to learn to walk in each other's shoes, you know, and talk more, communicate, and learn to listen. Listening is one of the hardest things, I believe, to do, because sometimes you can be listening but thinking in your head, okay, what do I want to say? I want to answer that, and you've totally missed what that person's got to say. You've got to actively listen, you know, actively listen. Put down all your agendas and listen and reflect back. Are you saying this and are you saying that? You know, and take on board what that person's saying. And sometimes not being too quick to answer or even to retaliate. You know what I mean? Because sometimes when you're not so quick to retaliate as well, answers come to you even quicker. Do you know what I mean? And you're able to respond in a more sensitive and appropriate way. So it's a learning curve, and bringing up children thinking they were going to be the perfect ones. That for me was really hard. My husband was, I suppose, the disciplinarian, and I was the one who would reason things. I wanted to reason everything through and talk things through and explain things through, And I always thought I was doing the right thing, Whereas I was critical, like, you sure you're doing the right thing, or you spoke to them too hard, or and it's just interesting. Sometimes you reflect on life and you think, wow, I wish I'd done things differently, you know, because no, there's no guidebook really, is there, to being a good parent? No real things that tell you, all right, you need to say this to them, or this is the way you need to say this, or this is what you need to do in that situation. Your blueprint comes from how you've been brought up yourself, and that's what you learn from, whether to do or not to do, you know. And many things I said I wouldn't do that my parent did, you find yourself doing those things. I remember, when my parents used to call us sometimes, there were four of us, and they'd call us by different names. I always vowed I'd never do that. I'd never call my kids by a different name. I know their names, but you find yourself doing the same thing. And it's so funny. It's so funny. But yeah, bringing up my boys, two boys, it was it was a it was difficult, to be honest. Yes, and I don't know how single parents manage that task, because all right, I had my husband, but it was hard work. And I remember thinking that boys would have been easier than girls to bring up. They were just just hard work as well, and going through school and college and life and relationships, all those things were difficult. And I remember teaching my boys, how to, I'd say, try to be decent human beings, be respectful, treat people with manners. Um, and um, I remember my sons saying to me one time that, Mom, when you used to say to us, if someone offends us or tries to harm us or whatever, we should turn the other cheek, meaning don't aggravate situations or walk away from trouble. They said, if we'd ever listened to a word you said, Mom, we'd be dead. Wow. Because what they're trying to tell me is, Mom, your world is different to our world. And you know what? I hate to say it, but I realize that now. I really realize that now. And I feel, as a parent, older parent, I feel out of sorts, to be honest. And I don't know if there's any parents out there who feel that way. You know, it's a horrible situation to be in. Sometimes you don't even understand the language they use, you know. Um, it's strange. And I don't know, did you ever watch that program, Adolescence, which I've been banging on about for a while? And when you look at that program and you see the parents and how they assume they understood everything going on in their children's lives, and to beat the stark reality was when they realized they didn't. I think many parents realize that today. It's a different world. I mean, you look at some of the things now with what's happening with children who are vulnerable, who don't feel that they measure up to the what people perceive of them, how they should be. They have low self-esteem. They're probably kind of not in with the in crowd, so they're quite vulnerable. And as you know, there's a negative element out there that has an eye for vulnerability. It picks up on it and it abuses it. There are people out there who groom our vulnerable children. You've got, well, it's in the news, isn't it? Where these people befriend you, they love bomb you and make you feel like you're someone special. and then buy you expensive things, and you think this person cares about me. They see me, and then when your emotions get tied into that, then you're caught in a trap. You're caught in a deadly vice. And so many children, vulnerable children, have been caught out, boys and girls. You know, you got County Lines who does that as well. You know, and it's it's a it's a painful thing for parents to see their children caught out in that kind of thing. You know, and you know what as well. The funny thing is as well is that not just children get caught out as well, because as I said, I worked in social care, and I went on a training, and the training, what they were taught us was about cuckoo. I don't know if you've ever heard the word cuckoo. That was new to me. And what cuckoo is, it's when, like for instance, an elderly man, say for instance, who is struggling at home, probably can't really take full care of himself, but then he is befriended by a young girl who basically goes to his house, stays over, and bit by bit she takes over, starts spending his money. But he thinks she's a friend because she gives him some kind of company. But all she's doing really is abusing him. And then she might invite other people into that same house, into his house, to further abuse him. Sometimes they use his abode as a drugs place, or even to put stolen goods or whatever, and that's what you call a cuckoo. You know, and that was interesting to me. And we've had citizens who've had that kind of experience, and trying to safeguard that person is hard work, hard work. You know, so I take my hats off to social care who have to basically try to protect vulnerable citizens. So it's a harrowing situation. So yes, I think that is me for today in terms of talking about some of my experiences as um, a mother, a wife, talking about my siblings and their experiences about being in Jamaica and coming to this country and experiencing the lack of bonding and having to build from nothing to something, and how difficult that was, and how many other people there are who have gone through that and are still struggling today. You know, and I would love to hear from you, really, of your experiences, because that story does need to be told. So please like, subscribe. I always get this mixed up. I always never get to say all the whole word, but you know what I mean. And share, yes, please share, because you know we need to talk about these things, don't we? We need to talk about the things that's close to our heart, some things we're struggling with, and we don't share it. Especially men. Men are the worst. They don't share anything. They keep it all inside, and it does damage. It does damage. That's why we've got so many of our men in the mental health system, because they don't talk about these things, and they need to, and they need to be listened to. So be kind to yourselves, and let's be kind to each other. Let's really be kind to each other, because we don't know where people are coming from. So thank you for listening. I hope you tune in again soon.